Hi everyone, so my name is Rachel Davies, and today I'm going to be talking about a project that's looking to understand the impact of bilingualism for autistic children. So this was a project conducted with Antonella, who's here today, obviously, and Sue Fletcher-Watson and Roseanne Morris at the University of Edinburgh, along with our lovely stakeholder group I'll talk about later. So just to introduce the kind of field a little bit, so as everybody in this room knows, a huge number of children worldwide have the opportunity to hear or speak another language. And so logically, that's a lot of autistic children in that category as well. So research shows that bilingualism is unlikely to harm the development of autistic children in any way at all. In terms of cognitive skills, there is now a growing literature that suggests that bilingual exposure definitely doesn't lead to poorer development and can lead to potential benefits across some domains as well. Importantly, aside from kind of what we know about cognition, studies have also shown that children from families who do speak more than one language benefit from, close family and cultural connections that the language kind of helps them to share. And these benefits are also associated with positive social and emotional well-being as well. So despite this kind of plethora of benefits that we know about, many clinicians, parents, educators of autistic children still remain concerned that bilingualism could be harmful for their child's development. And parents are frequently still advised by clinical practitioners in the UK and beyond to raise their children monolingually. And the reason why is basically the suggestion that it will help to avoid confusion or, stop any further language delays that an autistic child may have. So the work I'm talking about today really came after a large longitudinal study that the same team, along with Hugh Bagliati and I conducted at the University of Edinburgh. And the first part was something I'm not going to talk about in detail today, but just to give you a kind of background. We were really looking to add to this literature about cognitive development and try and understand the effects of bilingualism on different kind of facets of cognition in autistic bilingual children. So we conducted a longitudinal study with 2 time points with children aged between 6 and 12 years. We visited children and families twice in their homes. This was all children across the UK, using extensive task batteries focused on executive function skills, language skills, social skills, and not only focusing on kind of speaking one or more languages, but also thinking about exposure as well. We know that many autistic children are minimally verbal or don't speak or, selectively speak. So we felt that it was realistic to focus. I'm so sorry, I think there's about to be a fire alarm.
Attention, please. The fire alarm system is about to be tested.
Wow, that couldn't happen at a worse time.
Please take no action.
I'm going to just stop for 1 second while this happens. I'm so sorry. I'm going to mute it as well, just for the...
Don't worry, Rachel.
Oh, God. Okay, I think that's over. I'm so sorry. That's literally never happened before in 2 years of working here. So in a nutshell, what did we find? Well, we found no harms of bilingualism, as to be expected, and we found some tentative benefits in executive function domains specifically. We found lack of group differences between autistic and non-autistic children where we'd expect to see them usually. And so we were wondering if we also potentially had kind of low levels effects of positive effects of bilingualism going on here as well. In case you would like to read a little bit more about this, I've just put a QR code up. I can put links to these as well. But these are some of the papers from our team that have focused more on the cognitive aspects as well. Okay, so now I've kind of spoken a little bit about what the cognitive research tells us, and knowing that it's very unlikely that we'd have any negative effects of bilingualism. we realized as we were kind of running this study that we don't really have any information about how autistic children perceive, the role of languages in their lives. We know there's this paucity of research that actually quantifies children's, oh God, honestly.
Attention.
Okay, they were just telling me that it was over. Sorry again. Right, let's try and focus. Yes, so although, we have no kind of research asking children what they think about bilingualism, what they think about feelings towards cultural and linguistic identity. There's so much research that shows us that access to kind of culture and language identity should be a fundamental right for all children and all people. But as I mentioned, we know this isn't the case for autistic children. We also know that research shows that children, it's crucial for children to feel involved in the decision-making process when they're taking part in research as well. And so the argument here is that we can't support an individual's cultural and linguistic identity without having an understanding of their identity from their perspective themselves, rather than thinking about parent perspectives or clinician perspectives. Okay. So I just kind of want to recap a little bit, because I get this question a lot in talks as to why we think it's important to focus on children. Why aren't we just asking parents what the family life is like? And I think, most autism research and advocacy and services, we know it focuses on young people and children. And yet, despite the fact that we have this focus on autistic children in research, there is almost no research actually including the voices, perspectives and experiences of children themselves. The majority of research is still very much deficit-based and focusing on how we can change a child and make them more neurotypical. And in particular, many people often see, non-speaking participants as too difficult to include in research. We know that parents and guardians commonly kind of act as proxies for their children. And we say this raises serious validity concerns because what a parent thinks and what a child thinks, as we all know, can be very different. We know parents and clinicians have this ongoing kind of struggle with the idea that bilingualism may be a negative thing in their child's life. And we really need to know, what do children think about this? If we know that it's not bad cognitively, do children want to be bilingual? How do they feel about it? So this is the kind of underlying kind of crux of why we're doing it. Okay, so we decided to conduct interview studies with autistic children and young people about the intersectionalities of their identity. We had both speaking and non-speaking participants, so I'll talk about that in a little bit. So we had some funding from a charity called FERA, who allowed us to create this interview tool. So we recruited 12 children between the ages of 9 and 16 to take part in the interviews. And just to add that this whole kind of interview and the whole process was co-produced with our steering group, who are made up of researchers who are actually here in the talk today, and then autistic multilingual adults, parents for autistic bilingual children, and we had a young researcher group as well, who were all young adults who were autistic and bilingual, to ensure that they're really having a part in shaping the questions that we're asking and making sure that we're focusing on the right things. So after meeting with our steering groups and our young researcher groups, our areas of focus were thinking about the understanding of being autistic and bilingual, family and sibling dynamics, everyday life experiences, including friendship and hobbies, and where and how different languages were used in and outside of the home. Okay, so in this kind of qualitative study, like I said, we've created 3 different interview tools. We wanted something that could mean that we could include a wide variety of participants, because this often doesn't happen in autism research. And we wanted something that could be altered at the time, depending on the needs of participants as well. So some participants wanted to participate online. They didn't necessarily feel comfortable being in a room with a researcher. So they had the options to type their answers in chat boxes, use interactive whiteboards, have chat-based responses, or a more traditional interview setup where they were being, a kind of back and forth being asked the questions in a traditional way. We then had an interview that could take place in the family home, and it was kind of more of a show and tell type interview. So this is technically for slightly younger participants, where they could show us items related to food, their families' cultures, things relating to where they go on holiday, grandparents, and then respond to the same questions about them. And this also allowed them to use different communication devices as well. Participants were also asked if they did come into the university, if they could bring some of their favorite belongings. We also offered iPads to post out that people could take photos on or videos, so we could chat through them as well. So basically trying to get, make it as comfortable for all of the participants as we could. We had some really lovely results, which I'm going to present to you now. These are very preliminary. We're still kind of actually analysing the data. We split the participants into two different groups for the analyses based on whether or not they had an intellectual disability and if they were verbal or not. Because we had long discussions about this and felt that we were worried that the non-speaking participants may kind of get, engulfed and their data kind of lost in the verbal participants' data. So the results I'm presenting today are part of a thematic analysis that we conducted with our 9 speaking participants. And as I say, this is kind of subject to change, but really wanted to present what we've found, what we've been discussing. So theme 1, adventure and opportunities. So I should say, importantly, none of our participants were solely negative about bilingualism, which is really good. Obviously, their children felt there could be downsides sometimes, and that's really interesting and important that we noted that. But they didn't really feel like it was reflective of their overall life experience, and they felt like overwhelmingly that bilingualism played a really positive and additional part to their lives. So as part of this theme, participants told us that bilingualism was really an avenue for self-expression, and provided them with lots of opportunities. They felt more than their friends who weren't bilingual for fun and adventure. So lots of participants talked about making traveling easier, making friends in different countries, feeling like you have a special friendship with someone who shares a culture that you only get to experience in the summertime in a holiday, for example. And participants said they felt really happy and understood when they got to use both of their languages, or more than 2 languages. So theme 2 was talking about kind of everyday bilingualism. So thinking about being bilingual and autistic in everyday situations. So in terms of linguistic skills, many participants told us they felt that knowing more than one language had kind of prepared them to learn more and get better at new languages. So even if it was just understanding rather than speaking, they felt really keen to learn more languages. Participants also said they felt that being autistic might be able to help them learn other languages. They felt like this was a kind of skill that kind of enhanced language learning for them. And in terms of self-expression, participants felt they could express themselves more authentically in particular situations when they were speaking one language or another. They felt that it helped to understand other people's emotions. And a couple of participants talked about being autistic. They might struggle sometimes with neurotypical people's emotions, and that perhaps actually being able to share a language maybe helped them with that barrier sometimes as well. Okay, so our third theme was called My Language is My Culture. So here participants were talking about language preferences, and if and when did participants prefer speaking one language over another. So 2 kind of main areas were identified. So first, a pragmatic issue, so more about how relevant or useful is one language to a specific situation, which makes logical sense. The second was really related to actually the sensory aspect of languages being spoken. And some children said that maybe this was related to them being autistic. So they had, overwhelming preference for how one language sounded or felt being spoken over the other. And even if it wasn't, necessarily the correct situation to use one language, they would overwhelmingly prefer to use one language because it felt better to actually speak, which I thought was really interesting. And then we have the fourth theme, which is kind of values and importance. So this is asking children about the importance of bilingualism within their family and for themselves. And this is quite a big theme. So I'm just going to kind of touch upon this, but happy to send out the preprint when it's available. So participants who are actually less proficient in their second language, particularly compared to, say, siblings or cousins or young people within the family, did say that they could at times feel excluded at things like family events, and there were feelings of isolation reported when children felt they couldn't contribute to that conversation. Related to this, when complex discussions arose with family members that required increased amounts of switching between languages, some participants felt really overwhelmed at that because they felt they just wanted to use one language or the other. And again, some participants, the older participants, questioned whether maybe that was related to them being autistic, maybe that's something that they find tricky anyway, kind of switching between situations, and it was a little bit more overwhelming for them than it may have been for other people. Nevertheless, those participants still would never change their views on wanting to be bilingual and saw it absolutely as an overwhelmingly positive part of their life. Participants also talked a lot about closeness with their parents. Many used the example actually of feeling kind of special and having what they called a secret code. One participant talked about how they loved being out in public and feeling like they could have this private conversation that most people wouldn't be able to understand with their parents. It made them feel more comfortable in certain situations and trying new things. And they felt much closer to their parents in these situations as well. Okay, so preliminary conclusions. So our findings are really highlighting the kind of complex and rich relationships that autistic children, bilingual children do feel towards both their bilingualism, their culture, their identity, their parents, and the role it plays in their relationships and their life experiences. It really highlights the value, that bilingualism plays in their lives, to think about family dynamics, closeness with relatives, and particularly avenues of self-expression, which we've seen in the adult, literature with autistic bilingual adults as well. So that appears to be similar from a very young age. It also absolutely shows the importance of child voice and actually incorporating that into our findings. It demonstrates to families and practitioners how important being bilingual is to autistic children, as well as non-autistic children. And hopefully that could eventually feed into, the process of actually deciding what languages to speak with your child in the future as well. So we think it's really important that we're kind of collaboratively disseminating our findings. And we think that, our findings absolutely should not be limited to scientific publications. So just to tell you very, very briefly about what we're planning and what we're doing, we asked participants to draw a picture of themselves or something that reflected their identities. And that's actually currently being made into an animated video that's going to be kind of showcased for children. The script also kind of co-written with our participants as well. So something that can kind of show off what is autism and bilingualism and what did we find. Something that we're also adding our findings to from this research is a project that I've been working on with Bérengère Degas, who is here as well. So we started thinking about information for practitioners, for educators, for parents, as to what people needed to know about autism and bilingualism, because it seems that people just aren't sure about the decision-making process. So we've created practitioner resources that have been endorsed by the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists, just 2-page kind of information. So hopefully practitioners feel a bit more comfortable kind of promoting or not saying that bilingualism is negative. And then for parents, we've created these very simple flyers, kind of myth busting about autism and bilingualism a bit, that we'll be adding these research findings into as well. These have been translated into 16 languages, so you can use the QR code here, but I'll put the link into the chat in a second as well. And we're currently building a website, a kind of autism bilingualism hub, adding more translations and also creating an animated version of this as well. And of course, we're working with our project partners, so one of those being Bilingualism Matters, and the other being Autism Europe, to think about ways that we can disseminate this internationally as well, because we think it's really, really important that people are kind of finding, you know, positives about being autistic and bilingual. Finally, just to thank you. So this is the research team. This is our advisory group who helped in every single stage of the process, and to our young researcher group as well. Thank you to Fira, thank you to Bilingualism Matters. I think that's all my thank yous, and I'll stop sharing. Thank you.